Pending. First item to receive declaration of interest on procedural rule number 8. Are there any? No. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Kelly and his substitute is Councillor Adams.
Okay. And minutes of the meeting held on the 14th.
Apologies from Nigel Shaw.
Item 3, minutes of meeting held on the 14th of December. And there's a little script here for you, Martin, in terms of cabinet response. If you just quickly go through that. And then I'll go on to accuracy. I can deal with it quite quickly.
So it's item 12, introduction of the district-wide curbside food waste collection, an additional recommendation 1A that the district-wide food collection service commence in October 22. And item 13, the housing allocation policy review, recommendation to amend to approve the proposed change to the housing allocation policy as out in Appendix 2 and to review the policy on an annual basis. Then on to item 17, the street naming and numbering policy and introduction of charges. Cabinet agreed the recommendations as set out in the report and did not consider it appropriate to give an exemption from the charge to existing homeowners who wanted to change the name of their property. Item 22, planning, regulatory, housing standards and waste team services, IT migration. The committee recommended option 4. Cabinet agreed the recommendation in the report and approved option 2.
Right, thank you. Right, so on to minutes of the meeting, the 14th of December. For accuracy, are there any amendments? Or are we all happy? All happy? Wonderful, thank you. Matters arising, any matters arising? Just dealt with one sort of in advance there. No, thanks, thank you. And we'll move on now to Chairman's announcements. There are none. Public speaking, James.
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll move swiftly on to item 8, review of public, of the budget questions to Cabinet, page 20, Ken. Now, we've got a little bit of an issue here this morning, Cabinet. That is usually the way we've done this for quite some time, is that we allocate questions to members. Members have been involved in helping to form the questions at a meeting with Rodney, etc. Unfortunately, we don't have that allocation here this morning. So the way we're going to deal with this for this year is in an impromptu way, is that myself and Martin, so I don't lose my voice as well, we'll just put the questions and we'll do it on an odds and even basis. So I'll kick off on question 1, Martin will do 2, then we're proceeding. And then if that prompts any members' memory as to how we arrived at that question and you want to supplement, then at that point, please come in if you've recalled it. Yeah. Okie dokie. Right. So we'll move on to the questions on starting on page 20. So, question 1. We are aware that the planning team is under pressure and that there will be some significant planning applications over the coming year, e.g. RACEF. How is the Cabinet ensuring that the planning function is significantly resourced to deal with these demands? And who is covering this one?
That's myself, Chairman.
Okay.
Councillor Lawn's unavailable to be here today, so I'll be answering any questions.
Thanks. Okie dokie. So the question here, the answer that's recorded here, can any member remember how we was coming around that, or anything you want to supplement on it? No? Okay, over to you, Martin.
Are you not reading the answer?
Sorry?
you not-
No, that's for them to read the
Okay.
answer. I don't read their answer for them. So Councillor Long's not here. We just clarify that the officer's here. If you just ask the question.
Well, ask the question again.
No, your question, which is evens.
Oh,
So
right.
we're doing odds and evens.
Are you not taking the answers from the question?
Well, what we've just done, this is part of the problem, yeah? Councillor Lawn isn't here to read it out. So we've taken it as read because the officer's here.
Okay, that's fine.
And I've just asked the committee if they've recalled if they want any supplement. No answer. So now we're moving on to the even, which is your question.
Chairman.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. Would it be easier if I just said the answer is as per
Yeah.
laid out in the paper before you?
That'd be
If there is any
wonderful,
supplement question, then we'd be happy to answer that. That then gives you the prompt to move on to question 2,
That
unless
would-
there's a supplement question.
Yes.
Yeah, and it'd
Yeah.
be really helpful if just moved a bit quicker on that one, but never mind.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Right.
May I ask?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
It says here,
It says on here that a separate business case is being prepared for members to consider the resources that are needed to deal with this workload. Do we have a timescale for that? Because I'm not sure quite whether I've seen something on that already or whether that's coming at some point in the future.
Yes, that's currently being prepared. That's been prepared at present, so that'll be going through the portfolio holder. So that'll be going through Sue Lawn imminently. So that's being drafted in terms of understanding what resources are required in terms of that workload coming through, the skills required in terms of staffing, and in addition to that, current strategic level agreements with the county council in terms of how we deliver some of our technical expertise. So that will be with Sue Lawn in the next few weeks.
Can I just one more thing then?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great. So have we got some slight additional allowance then for this in this current budget?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sean.
Okay, so yeah. No, that's good to see. Yeah, so we're currently going through this year's budget setting, and within this year's budget setting, planning has set out its requirements and what it's asked for. So there are some growth points in that. So those will be coming forward as part of this year's budget setting. The business case that this is talking about is different to that and will be outside of that and in addition to that. So we will obviously look at that when that comes forward. But to answer your question, yes, there are some growth points in this year's budget that's being proposed, as I understand it, at this point in time.
So that just arrive, just again, something, so that would arrive in time for the February budget, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it'll come initially to Cabinet on the 8th of February, which I believe means it will come to ONS the week before. So you'll see it then. So papers will be out the week before that, probably next week by the sounds of it. We're almost there. So yeah.
Okie dokie, thank you. Somebody, oh yeah, Caroline.
Are these extra resources being planned because of the large developments coming up? Because when we brought up the issue of planning staffing before, we were assured that planning was fully staffed.
Okay, I think like the rest of us, we need to wait and see the business case and the rationale as to why there's a need for extra resources. As I say, there are some growth points in the budget that's coming forward that relate to specific activities. But beyond that, we now need to understand as we move to the new system, what that requires to enable us to do that outside of what's already been agreed as part of that business case, which I'm sort of straying into question 2 now. So I apologise for that. But the additional requirements we'll just need to go through as part of that business case for the resourcing of the planning team in relation to what they believe is in addition to what's going to be in next year's budget at that point in time.
Okay. Right, so if we're happy to move on to, thanks, Sean. Move on to Martin.
So question 2 was a key project will be to review the planning IT system and potentially implement a joint system with SNC. What is the progress with this project, and how will this be resourced to ensure it is successful?
Okay, so do you want me to just pick up on that one? Let's say Sue's not here. So the planning system, as I alluded to, we did go through that business case. So it went through SEC on the 7th of December, ONS on the 14th of December, and actually Cabinet agreed it on the 21st of December. So that's moving forward. That outlines the resources required to do the project, and to put that in place, and the timescale is part of that. So that's where we are at this point in time, and that now moves forward.
So again, I'm sorry, I'm guessing, Sean, it's the same as the last answer in terms of the that coming forward to the cabinet meeting and then the ONS before that on that business case.
No, we've done that one. We did that one at cabinet on the 21st. Sorry, on the 21st of December.
Right. So the resources that are needed, sums have been.
Okay, so the resources for that project were identified as part of that project's business plan. The resources for planners and additional planners is a different requirement should that requirement manifest itself.
Yeah, it's just that last sentence in here. Right, thanks. Yeah, I've got grants. Then Sue.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This response obviously must have been prepared before, in December, before the cabinet meeting. I was just curious just to say why the response for this meeting wasn't amended to reflect that the decision has been made regarding the RT, even though it was different from what was put forward by SEC and by overview and scrutiny in December.
Yeah, I'd just like to apologise to ONS that it hasn't been updated. It should have been updated, but circumstances overtook us as to why it hasn't been updated. And you just have to accept that that's where we are with it. The updates we've got, and we'll feed those in as we go through. So I'm sorry.
Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. I'm a bit confused as to why there's a business case being prepared for resources needed to deal with a workload which is foreseeable after the budget meetings have been held. Why was that not done before? Is this a stage of consultation with the staff? In which case, shouldn't that have been before the budget meetings and the budget was put together?
Sorry, you're losing me now. So the resource requirement to do the project is part of the project's business case.
Oh, sorry.
So that's question 2. Question 1.
Yeah, I think I've overlapped back onto question 1.
There is an ongoing debate, discussion, conversation as to whether additional resources are required over and above the resource that's been identified for the 22-23 budget. That's what the business case for question 1, when it comes forward, will look like. Obviously, we've heard from Tracy that conversations are going on at the moment between herself, Helen, and the portfolio holder, Sue, as to what that looks like and where that comes forward. So when that's available, we'll see it, if there isn't a requirement for additional resource. But also that needs to take into account that we're obviously moving to a new planning system and how that works.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, I was under the impression that the budget was put together on the basis of consultation with the officers, and I just wanted to try to establish whether that is actually the case. So were the planning team involved in setting the budget? Because I'm a bit confused as to if they were, why do we now need to them to put a case together to review what they've already had input into?
So yes, the planning function has put forward its budget as to what it believes it needs to function. it would seem that they now feel that there may be a need for more. But until I see that business case, I don't know what's in that. So I don't, like you, quite know what's going to come forward in that business case, because the business case for the new system actually had a reduction in FTE, not an increase in FTE. So we need to understand what those pressures are and how those pressures are expected to manifest themselves before we can then understand that. But we still have to move forward as a snapshot in time and deliver the 22-23 budget. So that's been done to a point. But it would seem that there may be additional requirements coming out of planning that weren't put forward at the time of when the budget stuff was done. But again, until we see the business case, we don't know.
Okay, Emma and then Trudy.
Yeah, just to further clarify this, what we're talking about, so the first question is about the planning team as they sit at the moment. The second question is about the business case, and I think we've covered that off. Just to go back to question one and to kind of amplify what Sean is saying, we've had the planning advisory service do a review of the planning team and the resources required because we have so many major applications coming through. So that review is ongoing, and I'll be linking in with Helen Mellors in terms of what does that advice look like. So absolutely the team have been involved in putting forward the budget and how it stands and the resources they need as it stands. This is about looking at the major developments that we know coming down the line and making sure that we're adequately resourced to be able to deliver on those major projects. So that's why the kind of the timing's a little bit, feels like it's a little bit out of kilter, but we're reliant on PAS to do that review for us. So I hope that helps.
Trudy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just really to reiterate what Sean has said, the process has been the portfolio holders working with the budget managers. However, that then has come back to Sean and myself, who have sat with Rodney and Debbie and have still further challenged those. So it's not, there's another layer there. It's not just taken as read. We've requested digging a bit deeper. And with regards to IT stuff, we've always thought, well, once we've got a more efficient IT service, actually that should relieve some of the pressure on officers. So just because they say they want more staff doesn't mean to say that that's taken as read. So that's why we need to see the business case each time. So as Sean said, initially it hadn't come forward, and we'd already challenged what had come forward, and then this is a separate issue. So yeah, so the process has been that we've worked with all the budget managers and the directors, and then we've got, and further layers, Sean and I have sat for a considerable length of time with Debbie and Rodney looking at the results of all of those workshops.
Okie dokie. So move on to question 3. Cabinet on the 15th of June agreed to create a new environmental projects reserve of £750,000. What is the vision, intention and time frame for using the reserve, this reserve even? Judy, would you like to respond?
Certainly, Chair. Would you like me to read out the answer? I'd be delighted to.
Yeah, and unless members are happy with that and just want to come back on it as it's written.
Right, so I'll be happy to answer questions.
Okie dokie. Any questions on this?
Oh, haven't you? Oh, right.
No.
Oh, right, I will.
Okay,
I'll read them
thank
out.
you.
Thank you. The Council has a track record of working hard to meet the needs of our local communities, taking positive action to secure ongoing environmental improvement and improving the efficiency, performance and sustainability of the Council's own activities. Cabinet resolved in June 2021 to recommend to Council the creation of a new environmental projects reserve in view of the potential changes required arising from the recent Waste Government White Paper, along with other potential environmental needs. Council agreed in July 2021 to create this reserve. The Environmental Projects Reserve will facilitate the following: making future changes as required in the Council's waste services, delivering the Council's environmental strategy and action plan, containing, as it does, new areas of focus and substantial opportunities to progress the Council's aims and its ambitious environmental agenda. Three, it will enable the Council to address new and emerging opportunities and needs for environmental action arising, for example, in relation to the decarbonisation of the Council's activities and facilities and relation to the potential green bond community projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So a copy of what you've just read out, I've just asked James if he's got a copy of this. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it'd been helpful if that got handed out to us, because you've got it in writing. It's just easier then for the committee to understand if there's been a supplementary actually given in writing.
Yes, there's a few brief changes. There's nothing substantial there.
Okay. Yeah, so
I can send them around after the meeting.
Chair, I'll go and get it. I'll get it sorted now for you.
Okie right. So on the text that you can read, is there anybody want to ask at the moment anything on that? Fire away.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just comparing that response to what was written down. So I'm just looking for clarification, because originally it said that the cost of the carbon audit was going to come out of this this budget, or this reserve, if I'm reading this correctly. Is the cost of the carbon audit then separate? Carbon audit separate to this?
The carbon audit we found we needed quite quickly. So at that point, we hadn't got the reserve, and so money was found for that. It would be quite, well, I don't know. I would have to discuss it with the director and the finance people, but, you know, it is the sort of thing that it would have come out there if that reserve had been in place at the time we wanted to initiate the carbon audit, because it was something that came up, we felt we needed, wasn't in the budget, and we wanted to respond quickly. And that's the whole point of this. We haven't got to take 8 weeks plus to actually get to a decision.
Okay, so can I just follow up then? So then when you say part 2 of the aims and objectives of the, in terms of implementing the environmental strategy and the action plan, then the carbon audit, as I understand it, will then feed into that action plan. So we're not quite sure what's in that action plan, because that's still to be developed and will presumably be informed by the carbon audit. Is that correct? Is that the way it's working?
That, obviously, the carbon audit will inform the action plan. The action plan and the environmental strategy has always been viewed as a dynamic document. So as opportunities and also the law changes, that will need to change. And so, yes, we're looking forward to seeing the results of the carbon audit, and I'm sure there are actions that will arise from that, which will feed into the environmental strategy action plan.
Okay, thanks very much.
And the fund, Judy, you say, I remember that coming through, and that's the only way you can deal with it, with the 750. I understood that point. So.
Thank you, Chair. Judy, I just wanted to clarify what was perceived to be under the changes in waste services. So are we talking about the facility where the waste is taken to? Are we talking about implementing the
food waste collection service that's been proposed? Just what do you mean by that? Thank you.
As you know, we've negotiated the contract. We are clear where we're going. It will involve changes, and what we will need is some good communications. And so certainly a communication program, I think, is definitely needed around one there. And there may be other things that come up as well. We may like to do some other initiatives when we know the result of the consultation.
Sean and then Grant.
Yeah, and just to enhance on what Judy was saying, the white paper that came forward had a whole host of possible changes around the consultation. So, for example, there was a deposit and return scheme. There was changes being talked about around curbside collection. So there's a whole host of possible changes that could come forward. And I'm sure if we gave Judy 3 or 4 hours, she would take us through all of those. But at this point in time, none of those have an end point. We don't have an answer to them. They are a consultation. The white paper has some of that information around possibilities, but it has a whole host of change that we don't know the answers to yet, and therefore we don't know the ramifications or the costs that could be involved. But as the portfolio has correctly said, that these things could become part of what we have to do, and therefore we would need to find funding to do that. This could be the funding to do that if that's something we needed. On the other hand, it could well be that the government then, under their burdens, do fund that for us, and therefore we don't need to touch our own funding. We can do it in that way. So that just gives you a bit bigger picture on where that comes from.
All right, Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, in my mind, the response to Councillor Davies's question regarding the carbon audit. Is it my understanding, because I'm aware that we've got, it was originally going to be this late this afternoon, but I think it's now been moved to some date in February.
3rd of February.
Yeah. So it's support in preparing the presently commissioned carbon audit. Have we started spending money from the £750,000? In other words, the costs of the work that's presently being done, is that going to come out of this reserve, or are we going to put the costs that we've incurred getting this carbon audit work done to revenue budget? Or is that going to come out of what is still going to be? In other words, when we put that £750,000, is it going to be net of what has already been spent on this carbon audit? Just to clarify, where is the cost of the carbon audit going to be coming from? Is it going to be coming from the 750,000, or is it? It's only what is going to be spent after April going to come out of the cost of the 750,000.
Yeah, Rodney. I just sort of pointed out to Rodney because I thought he may want to come in on this at this point.
At present, the intention was the cost of the carbon audit, which is under £5,000, to actually come from the council's corporate contingency. But it would be equally valid to say we could use this reserve for it, but at the moment we will just charge it to the corporate contingency to leave that full balance available for projects going forward.
Can I just add that the only thing that I have authorised to come from that is 20,000 to do with the latest tree initiative. So that's the only thing that I know has been spent from that reserve.
So just clarity on this, because it said the written further supplement covered a point that Sean was covering as well on a question here around this issue of the white paper, which is in here, but of course you haven't seen it, so I think Emma's getting it now, but it'll be a bit late for this particular one. So the 750, as I understood it, and I think this is what you're absolutely trying to clarify here, because clearly Scrutiny will make sure, the funds are in place for the forward plan, etc. It's a contingency fund, essentially, that's there to cover these matters should they arise, and therefore you've got budget and balance to cope with that. That's essentially what's going on here, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, enable us to respond promptly to initiatives that we want to carry out, which will all be in doing actions, which is in our environmental strategy, although at this time those actions may not be completely defined.
It's a moving feast, isn't it? The environmental issue with white papers, etc. Right, Sue, and probably move on after this. Oh, sorry, Sean.
Yeah, again, just to elaborate beyond where Judy's taking that. So if you look at the process of where that fund was initiated, so the fund came into being in July, and as Judy says, prior to that, the audit had already been commissioned, so it didn't need to come out of that fund. As Rodney says, it could do, or it could have, but it's come from somewhere else. So that's where that sits. Moving forward, the key aspect of the fund was to deliver the environmental strategy action plan, and it was to put funds available to enable that to happen. And as that action plan comes forward, and as Judy says, that needs to formulate in more detail those deliveries, but as those deliveries come forward, they're going to need to be funded, and the fund, the £750,000 is there to enable that to happen. So yeah, that's where it sits, and that's how it will be progressed.
And did you want to come in, Sue, or you just? Yeah. Okay. So I think we've covered this adequately now. Thanks very much. So move on to question 4, Martin.
So question 4 was: the council has significant funds in reserves. What is the current reserve position, and what plans are in place to utilise these reserves?
Thank you. It doesn't look like this answer has been altered, but I'll read it anyway. The medium-term financial plan and reserves update report presented to Cabinet on the 23rd of November and ONS on the 16th of November. It provided details of the current usable reserves along with the expected use of these reserves over the next few years. So that hasn't changed from that report at this point. I think we will be looking at a review of the reserves again in the not too distant future. But at the moment, the report that you've already seen in November, so such as Broadland growth and projects coming forward with that, Food Innovation Centre, as we've got Judy's, well, not Judy's reserve, the environmental reserve. So these will all be reviewed again, but there's nothing changed from November at this point in time.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I've just read the supplement. You're right, Drew. There's nothing different in there. So the reserves, I think the question, I'm trying to remember now this because we went around the table on this one quite extensively at the workshop. I think the question was really sort of pointing to. I think we were talking, Rodney, at the time about 6 million something in reserves, and about out of this budget. How was that going to be utilised, and could that be identified as well? So I think what we're seeing here is medium-term financial plan and reserves report presented on the 21st of November, 23rd of November, provided details of current usable reserves. It did. But I think really the point that was being made from the workshop was that is actually quite a small proportion of reserves. So it was, could you utilise the rest of the reserves or some of the rest of the reserves in a productive way? Could you do that? That was really the driver, I think, behind the question. If you can recall that, Rodney.
So, as members will be aware, the council has 2 types of reserves, usable ones and unusable ones. So the report that was considered previously by Cabinet very much focused on those usable ones, because obviously the unusable ones, by their very nature, are not ones that you can support the capital programme or the revenue budget. So I believe the report to Cabinet did cover that information, provide what resources are there, and indeed what the expected use of those were going to be up until March 25.
Okay. So yes, go on, Julie.
Yeah, if it's okay, just to get, I mean, projects are considered all the time. For instance, a business case came forward for the second building at the Food Enterprise Park. It wasn't a project that we saw as viable, so we didn't take that forward. But we've certainly got the economic development team looking at projects. So, and the leader is obviously working on Broadland growth at getting that moving and getting a project going again, because it's things like that that will help us fill any funding gaps clearly going forward. So we need to look for projects. So, and as a, for instance, I know a business case as a result of not the last budget workshop, the one before, where we were considering the 916,000 underspends. One of the suggestions put forward was buying property to help relieve the temporary accommodation situation. And on the second budget workshop, it was confirmed that that business case is about to come forward. So it's moving all the time. The money is there to spend, but business cases have to come forward. And unfortunately, that takes time and they have to be identified. But we are certainly doing that on a regular basis. There was a lot of work went into the second building at the Food Enterprise Park, but it just wasn't viable in the end.
Yeah, and from what I remember about the response to that, and I actually agree with the Cabinet on this, even though the ONS, I think when we went through this ONS on the business case for it, there was a narrow majority for supporting the officer's recommendation, but there was information that wasn't really coming across in the ONS, which I think had come across to Cabinet. And I think on that basis, if that had come through to ONS, I certainly wouldn't have supported it, because there's clearly a risk to reserves in the future around that. And I think that was a wise decision the Cabinet made at the time on that second building, by the way. And I think you've answered this in this way. The key word you used, Trudy, was, we're looking for projects in the future, this next year, to help offset and use the reserves. So that's an ongoing situation, which you'd then be using reserves for. I think that's the key answer, really, in that one, and that's helpful, actually. And we can minute it as well, because it is about what would we do with these reserves for taxpayers, isn't it? And I think that's helpful, by the way. Was there anybody else on this? Nope. Okey-dokey. Right, so we'll move on. Question 5, which is me. The council has put council tax up in recent years, whilst at the same time reserves have increased. It's linked to the other one. Does this indicate that there is a scope to not increase council tax next year? Back over to you, Trudy and Rodney.
Yep, I'll read the answer out again. Reserves are one-off in nature and are therefore not a sustainable way to fund the council long-term. In recent years, a number of favourable variances, many of which have been one-off in nature, has allowed the council to add money to reserves, primarily to meet known future spending pressures. The medium-term financial plan and reserves update that we've already been discussing demonstrated the medium-term funding gap. The need to raise council tax or not will be addressed in the main budget setting in February 22. So yes, the choice is R. If you wish to not put up council tax, you need to realise going forward that can put a pressure on the funding gap, because if you say you put council tax up this year, it will then be there for subsequent years. It will already be in there to help fill the gap. If you don't, then that gap could widen. You could look at your services. I don't think any member would want to reduce services that we provide, but that is another option. But it's something that can be looked at each year. So you can look at if you've increased your reserves, you could draw on reserves if you've got a gap and not put up your council tax. So all the options are there, but it's something that is considered on an annual basis. I think it's well known that Broadland starts with the assumption that it won't increase council tax. Other councils do increase council tax automatically. That's their starting point. Broadland's assumption is not to, unless they have to. So the options are looked at each year, and a decision is made in the February budget, which is obviously not long away now.
So, so far, I know that, Rodney, you've had a meeting with the Lib Dem leader, an exchange in terms of the budget, which is just information, background information. Is the intention to not put up council tax this year because you think on reserves, on balance, we can cover not putting it up? Because the budget's just about to be set, isn't it? Or proposed, rather. Rodney, then?
To be fair, Chairman, I don't think it's Rodney's decision
that's
to
not my
make.
decision.
Right, right, no, because it's not a decision. I'm just asking for the information.
As I say, that will be a cabinet decision at their meeting. Whether cabinet wish to tell you what their indication is, it'll be up to cabinet.
Yeah, but I mean, have you had a workshop and what's your intention at the moment? That's the question, really. Sean?
Yeah, I think the portfolio holders probably answered your question in the basis that it will come forward for cabinet and then council to make that choice. The papers, as I said, must be out in the next week or so that will give you that indication. But until then I don't think we're in a position to give an indication of that. The consultation that's been undertaken has only recently finished. So again, we need to make sure that we pick up the outcomes of that consultation, which I think finished last Friday off the top of my head, but I might be wrong with that. So all of those things need to be taken into account before we actually then move forward. And as I say, I think the portfolio holder has probably positioned it in the right way that will then come forward for cabinet on the 8th of February.
Okay, so we're not in a position really then, ONS today, to just review that and the balances around it and if that is all going to work, basically. Trudy?
Can I just say it was only quite late last night that Rodney emailed the first draft of the budget. So actually, I haven't even looked through it yet because it came out last night and I was on a meeting last night anyway. So you can see how it goes right to the last minute almost before we make the final decisions.
Okay, so it's late last night. You're still not quite there. Brilliant. Well, not brilliant, but you know what I mean. This is why we're not in this position today. Peter? Who's... It's all right, Ken. Don't worry. Don't worry.
As a matter of principle, Chairman, I would certainly like to make the point that any attempt to draw on reserves to cover a revenue budget, I think, is inherently wrong. So as a matter of principle, I think we would want to say that that is something that I certainly wouldn't want to consider. I don't know what the Cabinet would want to consider, but certainly the revenue and capital budgets should be kept completely separate. We wouldn't draw on those reserves in order to fund the revenue budget. That can only be a one-off and cannot be a course of action going forward.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
view.
Yeah. Natasha?
There it is. With the council tax setting, the consultation has been going around and the public have obviously been commenting on it. And I've already had a few angry emails from residents saying that it's a foregone conclusion and we have no right to increase council tax. And I quote, "I won't let you get away with it," as though it's actually my decision. So just putting it out there that the public are very much aware that this is on the horizon and there's quite a lot of anger about it.
Okey-dokey. Trudy and Sean. I think unless there's somebody after that, we'll probably wrap this one up. Trudy?
Well, just to say, obviously, we're all in contact with residents, so I think we're fully aware on how they feel.
Sean?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that same principle, doesn't it? And again, the portfolio holder has alluded to it. You know, there are three choices and three things that impact on budget and therefore impact on the level of council tax. One is income to the council and what level that sits at. That level of income then provides a level of service, and we have a choice as that level of service that we can then work our way through and decide whether we want to reduce any of those service levels to reduce cost. And then picking up Peter's point, which is around the reserves, it's not sustainable to draw on reserves continually to pay for a revenue budget. Obviously, one-offs or odd years, that might be possible, but it's not something that you'd want to look to do long-term. So those three aspects are the aspects that would go into setting the council tax. I'd just like to make a point that, you know, Broadland's council tax is at the lower end of the council tax across Norfolk. So we, at this point in time, are one of the lowest. We're not the lowest, but we're one of the lowest Band D council tax at this point in time. And it would be hoped that we would be able to continue to be in that position. But at the end of the day, if the residents want the services, then they have to accept that there are cost pressures. And if we are continuing at the level they're at, then we may have to increase council tax. But we hope not to have to do that each year.
Okay, Sue, and then I'll wrap this question up.
Thank you, Chair. Trudy, could you just say in layman's terms why we're predicting there will be a funding gap over the next few years? Thanks.
Primarily, unfortunately, it's the funding from central government is unknown every single year. We find the week before Christmas, we're told what our funding is. We always, I think you probably know in Broadland, we always err on the side of caution, not overpromise and underdeliver. So we look at, as a for instance, the new homes bonus phasing out. We thought we would get a lot less this year than we actually did get, and that has helped. And then all of a sudden the government comes up with these one-off grants for a year, which they've done again this year. They did it last year, but we've only got a 1 year funding is all they've told us. So we can't predict. That is the absolute problem, really. So it is literally, we pretty much know our council tax, we pretty much know our business rates until they're going to do a business rate revaluation. We don't know how that's going to affect us either now. So going forward, we will err on the side of caution with regards to our funding. And it is literally because we don't know what that is. We're just, well, Rodney is guessing, if you like, as best he can, an intelligent guess, but it is a guess. And the big one, if they do it, will be the business rate revaluation. And that could hit us quite hard.
So each year, every council has to make assumptions, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's always the way, unfortunately. Good old days from decades ago when that was more stable have gone.
Do you know, I was trying to remember when we last had more than a multi-year settlement. I just can't even remember now.
I do remember when it was it. I was in London at the time, so it's a long time ago.
Okay,
I'll move on to next one.
Move on to 6, and this sort of covers the same here. The aspiration should be to set a balanced budget with no need to impact on service levels, draw on reserves, or increase council tax. Does Cabinet believe this will be feasible for 22-23?
Yeah, we've sort of covered it, but happy to read it out again. So Broadland Council has historically set a low council tax charge, and this is still our aspiration. However, until we get clarity on the long-term funding position for local authorities, it is very difficult to predict whether council tax rises will be necessary. The need to raise council tax or not will be addressed in the February budget this year. And it really just plays to exactly what I've said going forward. we don't know. As our funding this year has turned out to be better than we were expecting. So we're in a better position than we thought we could potentially be. But we've got a 1-year settlement.
Okay, so the answer on the first sentence, I guess, is yes, Trudy. Broadland has historically set a low council tax, and this will still, and this is still our aspiration. So,
yeah, as I said, we always start out with we don't want to put up council tax. That's our starting point every year when we look at the budget.
okie dokie. So I think we did adequately cover this on the previous one, so we'll move on and just catch up a little bit on time. 7, back over to me. COVID pandemic has put additional demands on services, particularly the Help Hub and the benefits team. We have been able to increase resources in this area in the short term by utilising COVID grant monies. However, what plans are in place to ensure we have sufficient resources once the COVID grant monies end? I guess that's you again, Trudy.
I guess it is. And this looks like this answer has changed from the one you have.
Let's find that, Trudy.
Okay. So the proposed budgets for 22-23, including COVID funding, are considered sufficient, and the teams are working through future modelling to understand how long demand continues for and what measures we can put in place now to reduce demand in the future.
Forward. Just viewing that against the original one. Okay. No. Okay. Yep. So.
Yeah, I think it's useful actually, because it is one of those things, isn't it, where we none of us really know what's going to happen. So I find these answers quite helpful, because then it just demonstrates that we're actually thinking ahead and thinking about that type of issue, because it is very much an unknown. So thank you for the answer.
Can I just come back? I mean, I think things that have worked well, we have taken forward. For instance, the community connectors that has come out of the COVID funding, and actually we've thought, no, we actually want to keep that going. So yeah, things like that we've already put in place. We want to carry on with that, and as it happens now, we've got the funding for it from the NHS anyway, the same as South Norfolk. So it's something that is reviewed constantly, and I don't know. Rodney might be able to help us. I don't know when the next COVID funding paper will come out with an update on what's gone on and what's left. You haven't got that right. Yeah. So I think when the next paper comes out and you can see what we've been doing and how much is left, that'll probably be really helpful.
Sure.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's just worth noting that COVID has changed the world considerably. This is now our world. This is the world we live in. COVID's not going away soon. So this now becomes the norm, which means our budgets going forward now become budgets that incorporate what we expect to be the impact of COVID in taking steps to enhance, protect, look after our communities. Now, some of the funding we still have, and as I say, we're waiting for the update on the papers around where that sits. But in some cases, as the portfolio holders alluded to, moving forward, we want to continue some of those additional services that we've been providing, and therefore they will be in the budgets moving forward. And that's now where we will be. That is our world. As I said, COVID is here and it's not going to go away soon. So we just need to make sure that we as a council adapt to that and incorporate that in our future plans.
Fran, your portfolio holder.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously around the Help Hub, I think we need to recognise that a lot of the work the Help Hub does is discretionary. However, what I would also like to say to everyone is it makes a huge impact on people's lives. It's proactive and it's preventative, and that's got to be a good thing for our residents and ourselves. So we get in early, so we turn things around for people, which is what we should be about. So I just want to say, you know, we're looking at all the services, we're looking at all the time, to be honest with you. Help Hub, we really are looking at all the time about how we can actually enhance our services. So I'm really pleased to say that's the case. And as the leader said, COVID has changed the way we look at the world, the way we look at how we support people. And I think that's, unfortunately, you know, difficult circumstances can bring out good things long term. So I think actually, you know, we're on a good trajectory, and we need to continue with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone like to supplement, or are you happy with this? Yes, so I'll move on then.
So question 8 was, at present, nationally, it is reported that there are plenty of job opportunities, but a lack of appropriately skilled candidates to fill key roles. A, is the situation in Norfolk, and specifically, is this an issue for our one-team recruitment? B, will the delivery plan / budget include any specific measures to address the skills gap?
Thanks. Yeah, fine. Bye-bye, Joe.
Thank you. The Norfolk Workforce has comparatively lower levels of qualifications than the national average, certainly MVQ level 4 and above. There is a partner-wide recognition that while addressing the attainment issue is crucial, parallel efforts to attract and support businesses that offer higher skilled and higher remuneration opportunities are crucial in closing the apparent wage and qualification gaps. Over 40% of residents in Norwich have an MVQ level 4 or above. Over 15% of residents around the Thetford area have an MVQ level 4 and above. And you can see the graph for HE skill qualifications per subject, Norfolk and Suffolk versus England average, paying attention to the architecture, building and planning area, in which Norfolk falls 2% below the national average. For some of our senior planning roles requiring experienced professional qualifications, we see significantly less applicants than more junior positions. Senior planning officer, 2 applicants. Surveyor team leader, 1 applicant. Planning policy assistant, 4 applicants. Excuse me. Planning officer, 5 applicants. Planning policy postgraduate apprentice, 11 applicants. Where training is provided as part of the job opportunity, e.g. planning postgrad apprentice, we can see that the vacancy had at least 200% more applicants than the planning officer post, that once the apprenticeship was complete, the individual would be eligible to apply. Some of the work we have been doing with apprentices addresses the skill gap, i.e. environmental health officer at undergraduate level and planning as postgraduate level to assist with these hard to recruit roles. The apprenticeships strategy includes our 3 strategic strands that we are working to, and this includes future skills and skill gaps, etc. So we have taken steps to address our hard to recruit roles already. Our delivery plan for the next year includes talent management, future skills, and attraction and retention. So again, we've had to identify ready for delivery. We are also working on the Future Focus project, so linking with schools, HE, on a couple of longer term projects to attract students into the public sector. Projects are Future Focus, Work Experience and Careers Ambassador, Council Ambassadors going into schools to promote careers. These projects we are working with the Economic Development team and Laura Smith. Training needs assessments will look at internal skills and talent management. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone like to supplement? No? You're happy? Thank you, Joe. Yeah, you can, Joe. Supplement your own
Yeah.
report. Yes,
Because
wonderful.
I'm very passionate about skills and training. The skills and training paper came forward in late spring last year through the Economic Success Panel, and we identified our direct delivery measures in that paper. I just would like to report on the Kickstart scheme. Our first 8 cohort members of the Kickstart scheme, which was aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds, I believe. They've just finished their 6 months, and out of the 8, 7 of those Kickstarters have been taken on to with those businesses, so they've been employed. Work for All is also going well. We had a large cohort of apprentices in-house start in the autumn, and that is really going well. We continue with our choices training, and we're also, as my answer said, we're working with schools and particularly the Norfolk Skills and Careers Fair. Thank you, Chair.
Caroline?
I just wonder what we're doing for the older person, say the 40s and 50s, who have lost their job and can't get back into work again.
Thank you. Yes, the Choices programme is aimed at those people who are probably, well, it's aimed at all ages, but particularly those people that have been at home for a little while with low self-esteem. And the aim is to try and give them the skills to get them back into work. We've been running this scheme for several years now, and it's very, very popular. And we've been able to find work for several of the people that have done the Choices programme over the years. Thank you.
Okay, just one quick one for me, Joe. It's just on the stats here, which is the 7 out of the 8 you referred to, and that was with companies on the government scheme Kickstart. How does Broadland identify the numbers? Because there are significant numbers, way above 7, that really could have done with a Kickstart, so to speak. And it's how we identify them. Are they known to us? What engagement takes place? Because there's some resource needed for that. You know, one person trying to do that as a 2-hour-a-week job on top, it's actually quite resource. It can be quite resource driven. So just wondering if you'd like to cover that, Joe.
Thank you. Yes, as a council, we have facilitated the Kickstart scheme, and the first cohort of these eight young people, that is just the first batch to sort of go through the Kickstart scheme. I think we've got about 35 or 40 on the Kickstart scheme. It's been incredibly popular, but that will finish, I believe, at end of March this year. So we just sort of we monitor all those Kickstarters that are on the ground, and we have actually taken on some Kickstarters into the council as well as part of our one team. Thank you.
So numbers are higher than this 7, aren't they? But the resource to cover that as a portfolio holder, you're happy that there's enough resource being brilliant. Thanks, Joe. It's all about that, isn't it? You know, this anyway. Right, so we'll move on, yes. Item 9, question 9. COVID pandemic has put pressure on our housing team. At present, the council mainly relies on leased properties to meet our urgent housing caseload. Will the council be exploring alternative options? And if so, when will this be done? Fred?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, is a simple answer. We are exploring whether we can build a business case to buy our own temporary and private sector rented properties. The potential exists to change capital into revenue, making our money work harder for us, as well as being able to provide better accommodation for our residents. We aim to have a business case ready for summer 2022 this year even. Thank you.
Brilliant. Anyone else? And again, the funding for that reserves, it goes back to the original question, Sean, isn't it? Therefore, there could be a pot there for that. So that could be a viable on reserves.
Yeah, if you remember back, and I think the finance portfolio did mention it, it came out of the workshops, the member workshops that were run as a suggestion around investing some of this year's surplus that was available. And it's then looking at how we do that and how that's taken forward, which is obviously what Fran, as the portfolio holder, is looking at doing in the best way and identifying the groups that we can best help in doing that with that investment.
And I don't know if Jonathan remembers this when he was on ONS.
We also have 2 additional properties that we own in Sprowston. So it's not that the council hasn't done things since then. This is in addition to what the council is doing. We've seen that demand has increased for temporary accommodation, so it just makes sense for us to move forward in play.
Martin, Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really welcome this. I know you're all sick of me talking about social housing. I really wish this is a route we could go down, but it's probably not likely now. But in terms of temporary accommodation, emergency accommodation, I'm aware of the Sprowston properties, but there has been a huge rise in people needing emergency accommodation through domestic violence, which increased during lockdown. And if we don't have enough properties that are available to people who are literally leaving in what they're wearing, and they've got to be secure properties as well. I mean, the trouble we're having in some cases that people have to accept somewhere because they need to get out, and it's not always near to where their children are going to school. There's so much upheaval. So I really wish there was a greater scope of appropriate housing to give people the security that they need. But I won't bang on about social housing again, but I am pleased that there is progress in this. Thank you.
So, Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree and support with your position, really. We do need to look at better accommodation. We want to look at accommodation. It's something I've wanted to do since I've become portfolio holder. We're spending about £250,000 a year on temporary accommodation. So anything we can do to turn that figure around, so some net income plus expense, has got to be a good thing. But people are, I'm pleased to say, and this is a lot of the work from the Help Hub and generally, obviously we had the Domestic Abuse Act gone through recently, that people are coming forward and identifying as being victims of domestic abuse. And obviously we've got a duty to support them as we wish to do. And I think the numbers this year over the last about 6 months, have gone from 3 to around about 35, if I remember rightly, coming to Broadland. So it is something we are very aware of and looking to address. So, yeah.
Thanks, Fran. No one else move on to the next one? Yeah.
Okay, so question 10 was the draft budget papers for 22-23 do not include any income and expenditure relating to COVID. Is this correct? And is it expected that the COVID support will need to continue during 22-23?
Back to you, Judy.
So at present, we are not expecting any additional government funding for COVID in 22-23, and many COVID support schemes will end by March 22. Where there is a need to continue with COVID support programs in 22-23, it is expected that these will be funded by the earmarked COVID reserves or COVID budget underspends that will need to be carried forward. As such, these budgets will be added as and when these are known. So I think it comes back to when that paper comes forward, giving the update on what's been spent and what hasn't been spent and what will need to be spent. I think that will probably answer the question there. So there is unspent money that has been carried over. And as the answer says, we're expecting that to cover what we need. But I think when the full paper comes out, we'll all have a clearer picture.
And the paper you're referring to, you mean the going through to budget?
Well, like Rodney said, in the start of the new financial year, the COVID paper, the COVID funding that we've had, the update will come through, what's left, what we're planning on spending.
And the date for that is imminent.
Well, I checked with Rodney earlier, and he said in the new financial year. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Right, okie dokie. All right. So the delivery plan. Delivery plan sets out council's aspirations, and those are quite wide-ranging, as the council provides numerous services. However, has Cabinet got any key areas that it specifically aims to divert additional budgetary resources to 22-23? Sean? Okie dokie, Sean.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Rest duty.
Yeah, I think if members remember back to a week ago, last Tuesday, we had the update member briefing on where the delivery plan sits, the aspirations linked in that delivery plan, not only for 22-23, but also 23-24, and how the council wants to move forward with a whole host of different things that it seeks to do, many which will require cost and therefore have a budget implication. And those things we went through, as I say, last week at that briefing session for all members. And I think that was a session that was very productive and informed all members of where the delivery plan is, what the different functions were focusing on, how they were seeking to deliver over the next couple of years, and also the funding that was going to be required to do that. So I don't really plan to repeat those aspects, but I would just perhaps like to give some key headlines on some of the things that are changing. So we now, starting on the 1st of April, have a new waste contract. As part of that waste contract, we're seeking to roll out food waste further across the district. And in fact, we will be rolling food waste out right across the district, so every household has the opportunity to take part in food waste and its collection, and therefore stopping it going to landfill. The other aspect linked to that was then we touched on the environmental aspect, and one of the councils, or expected to be in the baselining of the carbon footprint. One of the council's big users of carbon and therefore pollutants is the waste lorries that go around and collect all our refuge for us. And again, we've stepped forward and already put in place to reduce that by introducing hydrated vegetable oil, HVO fuel, into those vehicles. And I believe it was in the November cabinet that the environmental portfolio holder reported that reduced the carbon footprint by 98%, which is a huge reduction, as well as reducing pollutants that come out of the diesel vehicles. So I think that's a huge step forward. So again, as an initiative, that really sits well. And again, there are other things that we're doing. So again, from the country park and enhancing the country park that we introduced last year, and taking that further, something that will be coming through the panels as far as the master plan and how that sits, and investing further into the country park and making that more of an attractive activity for more families to enjoy across Broadland. I don't know if any of the other portfolio holders want to add anything beyond that, but I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Jonathan.
Yeah, just obviously
Jonathan.
regarding the delivery plan, it was a good workshop we had the other night, because it just highlights how many projects we are working on. And I know obviously Sean's mentioned there, obviously we've got the environmental strategy, we've got the new waste contract, we've also obviously heard about the other things regarding the Food Innovation Centre. We've got other things going on in other obviously the portfolios. But just as a quick list through, I will just quickly list them through. We're talking about projects on finance systems, web chat systems, customer service strategies, Revs and Bends systems, alignment of constituencies, elections bills, phase 2 of website, business case for the CRM, planning system, the Office 365 product expansion, business intelligence, office accommodation, waste customer service review, remote access solution, one team development, and Wi-Fi provision. We are working on a lot of projects, and obviously this is, the aspiration is, are we going to be able to work on these? Are we going to be able to work on projects? Are we going to have the finances? We are working on a lot more projects than, I would think a lot of councils are, and I think we should be very proud with the way the one team are working on all these projects, even in what we know as our difficult times. So there are a lot of things going on, and I think, like I say, having that workshop highlighted just how many projects are being worked on.
Just for letting you get, yeah, and there are a lot of projects. Jonathan recognised that. So in terms of the budget again and reserves, are there any additional that are being currently worked on that are not declared, if you like, for this budget, that possibly you may need to use, some unspent money on from the reserves to cover? Is there any plans? I think that's really what the question was trying to drive at.
I think the business cases will come forward. The officers are obviously aware of what they need to do coming forward. So budget requirements are already been put in, and we'll work everything through. And I think with that list of projects, we've thought about so much that there won't be anything that sort of suddenly appears and we say, well, we need to do that. We haven't got the money for it. So no, I think you'll find when you look at the list of projects we're working on, there will be no surprises.
Great, because it's all about resource and covering it. Sean.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and again, as we saw at that workshop, the initial high-level budget and requirements was laid out there. As that delivery plan comes forward, either to the February or the March cabinets and then on to council, it will also come with the budget that's required to do that. So it will then set that out in detail, the costs linked to those projects and how that's being funded and where that sits. So those things will all come together. As I say, we'll either see those in February or March, depending upon which cabinet and council they're coming to.
Okay. But again, just Jonathan, for the minute, clearly you can't see any issues in terms of budget problems around funding these for the future. That's our key premise here today. Thank you. So Ken, who's next?
Thank you, Chairman. Under the environment project sector, Sean made some very important points as far as I was concerned on health and well-being, particularly in regard to, I think, the Broadland Country Park. Now, there's still quite a lot of work to be done there, and I'd like to just get your view on whether there is, in the reserve there, has that been covered? And extending that wider, because, the health and well-being aspect and during the lockdown period has been very important to get people out and walking. Could I ask if the Broadland Park plus anything else has been covered and will continue in next year?
I think it was sort of covered earlier on, but Joe, sorry.
Thank you. The Broadland Country Park was purchased with external funding, and that came from as green infrastructure funding, I believe, from the Greater Norwich Growth Board. And there was also 2 years of funding to fund the project manager, Sarah Burston. And that is something that we will review in our master plan for the country park, which should come forward imminently. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. Now that expires in August, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, Ken. Yes.
So, are you pretty sure that we have got enough to cover to continue that very important work?
Well, I think we need to see the master plan first and how that sort of works through, and there is a possibility that we could go back to the Greater Norwich Growth Board and ask for further funding to come forward on this important green infrastructure project.
Does Sean support that, Chairman? Oh, sorry, Mike.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. So moving forward, we need to look at the wider scheme and how the different things come forward. As the portfolio holder has stated, the country park, we've been able to take that initiative forward. It's been front funded by Broadland, but we're actually receiving money back from the Growth Board, which controls the pooled SIL. So that's something that is being paid back to Broadland at this point in time. Once we have the master plan, we can then make a further bid to enhance the facilities at the country park, and I would support that happening. After all, at the end of the day, that's what the SIL funding is there to do, to enhance and improve the facilities related to growth and growth areas. So I would expect that to happen. Also, I'd just like to remind you that this isn't the only country park that will exist. We already have a lovely one in Old Catton, being Catton Park. But as I say, we have this country park that we initiated over the last couple of years. But as growth comes forward, we will see further country parks established both at Rackheath and at Beeston, which again will just enhance, as you say, the health and well-being of our communities and enhance their access to the countryside and to enjoy themselves. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, when you look at the council's operations from the outside, I fully appreciate the constraints within, the district council. But as Sean's just said, we need to look at the environment and the health and well-being of our residents. And of course, what's happening is that we're building and building and building, and it's all growth, 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 which is actually taking up a lot of prime agricultural land, other green land that we're somehow trying to compensate for through schemes such as the country park, which is fine. I can, fully support country parks, tree planting, hedge planting, and so on. But I think we also need to recognise, and it's just making an observation because I know the constraints on the council, that actually we're losing a huge amount of land. We're infilling green spaces, and that's certainly the feedback I'm getting from many of my certainly ward residents, is that this conundrum, if you like, and conflict between ever more growth, infilling of those green spaces, and what we're actually doing is just compensating for that loss. And I think we just need to recognise the reality of what's happening.
Sean, I think you indicated.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chairman. I think what the reality we need to recognise is that people need homes. There is a huge waiting list. We talked about people with temporary accommodation and being put into places that we have to put them in, rather than perhaps where we would like to put them in. Your colleague, councillor behind you, said about us moving more into providing the right and appropriate housing in our aspirations. That's something that we seek to do. It's one of our aims as a council to improve the housing that people has. And linked to that, therefore, it has to have a planned approach. Now, we know between now and 2038 that across the Greater Norwich area, there is a need for almost 50,000 new homes. Now, they've got to go somewhere, and we have to plan for that approach. Now, that has been done, that is ongoing, and in fact, the current local plan is at examination at this point in time. So those things are coming. We've all gone through those, and we've agreed effectively where those allocations should be. It's not this place to then complain when we lose some of the open spaces, some of the countryside to enable that to happen. We have to recognise that there is a priority to provide appropriate housing for people, and that has to be accepted. Linked to that then is the need to provide open space, the need to mitigate, and also within the planning policies is the need to improve biodiversity across the area. All those things are taken into account. All those things are being built into these plans. All those things are taken in and are part of those growth elements. So I think moving forward, this council is in a very strong position, not only to protect and enhance the environment, but also provide the housing that people need. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. We're actually moving into.
I realise this is quite a big debate.
I'll make a comment in a moment, so please.
I realise this is a big debate, but I'd just like to point out that yes, it is a big debate, and I mentioned the constraints on the council, but that when you look at the population growth within Norfolk itself, within Broadland, we're providing far more houses than are actually required, and it's the type of houses. It's houses which are affordable, and that's what we need to look at with the local plan. I've just made a submission to the hearings for the Greater Norwich local plan. It's commenting on those figures, and I know we're constrained by central government figures, but I think it's something that we really need to challenge, and because we are growing in terms of population, traffic, and everything else, which is damaging the environment, and it's not going to be compensated in the short period of time. So I know it's a bigger debate, but I think I just felt I had to make that point at this on this question.
Right. I'm just going to wind this up now because just professionally, despite our different views, we haven't all agreed to the allocation. That's just not factually correct. I've got a submission in, and we've had others that don't agree with the allocation. So just be factual about that. But we've strayed off into political policy around this issue rather than is the budget provision there? Is there enough budget for the forward plan, which we just need to come back to? And that debate, which has sort of just been entered into with the leader and yourself, Jan, is just strayed off of it. So even though some of us got very strong views around all of this, I think we just have to be a bit disciplined and just come back to where we need to be professionally for this budget scrutiny. And I'll just make that point. Okay, and just finish that point there and think back to you, Martin.
Yeah, so we're on question 12 now. Has the Cabinet considered further outsourcing of services as part of the forthcoming delivery plan? For instance, utilising the Anglia Revenues Partnership more? Trudy?
Yeah, thank you. So Cabinet is open-minded to all potential delivery mechanisms. Obviously, we looked at the local authority trading company for waste services, but chose not to go ahead with that. We have entered into a procurement consortium with Broadland. We contract with MP Law for legal advice, and we are currently in discussion with Anglia Revenues Partnership with regard to assisting with specific areas of specialist support. There are no plans currently for further wide-scale outsourcing, as obviously our primary focus is getting additional value from the joint working with South Norfolk Council, which I think you will see once you see the budget. You can see how well that is working. The collaboration with South Norfolk. So that is our primary focus at this time.
The specific on the question, for instance, utilising Anglian Revenue Partnerships more, I think you've got in here, Trudy, is currently in discussion with the Anglian Revenue Partnership with regard to assisting specific issues. So that direct question, I think you've just covered that.
Yeah, I've been talking to Simon Quilter. He's working on that.
Okie dokie. I know that on some of these projects, when they're looked at and then their sort of final decision is not to go ahead, I'm just aware that there was some sums spent on consultancy at the time. And I'm just wondering at what stage really projects are evaluated in terms of making strategic decisions not to go ahead or go ahead when consultants are involved. I know the sum was considerable, I think, on the waste one. I don't disagree with the decision, by the way, on that. So it's just at what stage, in terms of prudency around the revenue and the budgets, when you are looking at anything else. But then again, I can see here that you're not actually looking at anything else to outsource at the moment anyway.
No, and I think actually, I mean, Judy will give you a better idea than me actually, but with the local authority training company, actually, we did get a lot of valuable information from that. That then when we went on to procurement, the funding we had set aside, we had money left to pay for the procurement anyway.
Okay.
But we did get a lot of valuable information. I don't know if Judy wants to add anything to that.
Yes, I mean, the work that Eunomia did, and I presume that's what we're all referring to, was very useful, certainly on things like round rationalisation, and also informing what else is being done within the industry. So it was very useful.
Okie dokie. Right, so if we're all happy, move on. Oh, sorry, Sean.
That's okay. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it just pick up your point there. It's always that balance between having the most informed choice, having all that information, and the cost of consultants to provide you with that information. And it's where do you make those decision points, and how do you go forward in doing that in different ways? You've only got to look at the more recent one, perhaps the accommodation review, where we got to a point where we felt we might be able to make a decision, but actually we went away to get more information, and therefore we've invested more in consultants to get that information. So it's for the council to make choices at the right point in time, but to ensure that it's best informed to make those choices. And it's always difficult to know when you've got enough information or when you've got information overload. But it's a balance that we have to take. And obviously we've got to be careful because we are effectively spending public money. So it's ensuring that we have value for money when we do that. So it's a whole balance in the way in which that can be done. And it's as you say, it's just getting that at the right point and striking that right balance. Thank you, Chairman.
Sean. So I'll move on to the last, second from last question, because we've got an additional one here. 13. Council budget includes sponsorship income. Is there any... It's all right. It's all right, Ken. Don't you worry. Okay. The council's budget includes sponsorship income. Peter, is there a sponsorship policy underpinning this?
Okay, so with the council facing funding gaps, proactive income generation streams are required. With this in mind, a sponsorship and advertising sales manager post was temporarily recruited to see how successful this role could be. In 3 months, just under £35,000 worth of income was received and a sponsorship policy was drafted. This will now be reviewed with the ambition of gaining approval and the role recruited to again once more.
Right. So could you just cover this in terms of budget then? Was this, so far, has this been self-funding in terms of the wages spent? Or salary, rather?
Rodney, do you know how much the...
Emma?
So just to further on what Councillor Mancini-Ball has said, the post is in structure and is in the structure. It's currently not recruited to at the moment, but we will be going out to advert. That 30k covered that salary in 3 months. So we're hopeful that when we can get someone into that role on a permanent position, they would absolutely more than cover their costs and generate that income stream we've discussed.
Right. And of course, you'd monitor that, wouldn't you? Right. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question came out of how are we monitoring the ethics, if you like, of who we accept to promote. And so I wonder, we haven't seen the sponsorship policy yet, if that's all covered in there.
It will be, Chairman, and it obviously will come through due process once we've got that more of a refined policy. It was a kind of a test, let's see how it works, but we absolutely do have those ethical discussions. You've got to be really careful who you use for sponsorship and advertising, but there are some really powerful routes out there. So as with everything, it is about balance, but that policy will come through in due process.
Thank you. And then we've got this last one, Martin. Just in relation to this one came. I might actually recollect it, but this one came forward on the 30th of November, an ONS meeting. I think
It was added, Chair, when you reviewed the budget questions. It was added at that point in time when you were reviewing them to make sure they're accurate. That one was added in.
Right, and then that's when we went round the table about who would ask what questions, which has sort of gone down the road somewhere. Right, okie dokie. So Martin, yeah, do you want
to? I'll ask the question. I don't support it, but as part of setting the 22-23 budget, our cabinet considering aligning the value of member ward grants with SNC, i.e. increasing the BDC grant to £1,000. And just as a supplementary, I mean, this was answered previously by the communities team as well. If grant funding is not sufficient for you, then there are plenty of grant funding available.
Whoa. You asked the question, then we get the answer from the cabinet.
But
please, Martin. Sorry, Sean, far away.
That's all right. Martin was doing a great job. I support what he was saying. It comes back to the fundamental here. So the fundamental is no, we won't be increasing the member grant allowance scheme funding. So it will remain at £500. And again, most of us as members are finding that that's pitched at roughly the right level. Yes, we could always give away more, but it's a balance between how we do that. But there are so many other funding streams that we make available. So we have our own community infrastructure fund, which is unique to Broadland, which covers the large projects. And I know many of the town and parish councils have made use of that fund to deliver some quite exceptional things. One springs to mind is the the Salhouse Pavilion. The Rackheath Pavilion. Also, we have initiated last year the community lottery, which is now just about completed its first year and raised nearly £40,000 in that first year for community groups, which again is something that is enabling groups to move forward and use that funding in the appropriate way. So I think that the member grant scheme is there. It supplements all of these other things, but it's then down to individual members to find things specific for their area that perhaps don't quite fit these ones to enable them to take that forward and do things and support their area in the most appropriate way. Again, I don't know if the finance portfolio wants to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Just to say, I mean, with regards to the lottery, it's already paid out 38,000. By the time we get to its first birthday, it's on target to achieve its 45 that it's set out to do. And with regards to the grants, there was last year and there is at the moment this year an underspend anyway. It's difficult to recommend putting them up when we're not spending what we've already got. I, however, admire how many times you can keep bringing this question up in different ways, in different forums.
And just before we do, look, first of all, I want to say this question is actually inappropriate. I think it's inappropriate the way it's been answered as well, because what the budget question is about, it's not about political decision-making by the cabinet. It's a political decision, this one. If you put it up, you don't put it up. And the arguments in terms of putting it up are equally valid in a political arena. That's not really what this is for here. So I still can't remember how this got here. I'm not here to support or not support this in a political sense, or answer it in a political sense. So I'm just making that question clear, because it's not about budget provision. Is there enough budget to do this whatsoever, is it? But Caroline and then Sue.
With the community lottery, will we be getting a report to say how much each group has benefited from the lottery and how much money they've actually got?
There's going to be a celebration in some form, we don't know what yet, when it has its 1-year birthday. And a lot of the recipients are going to be invited to comment. And I would suggest it's well worth us asking the team, actually, if they could do that report and inform you of exactly. I mean, to be honest, you can go on the website and click on the different recipients and see how they've been helped. That information, I think, is pretty much on there anyway. But if it would be useful to have a list at the end of the first year, then I
think it would be useful, because then you can see how successful it's been for
absolutely.
each group.
And obviously, I mean, this is something, because it was very important to me that we had the community lottery, and I bang on about it all the time, and you probably get sick of hearing it. But actually, the more you can get your residents to register, the more that are going to be helped, and the more money will be raised. And bearing in mind, if a resident is buying a ticket, it's voluntary. It's not a put upon them to buy a ticket. It's up to them. So I just think it's a win-win with the lottery. And I hope from the first year it will just keep growing and growing as more and more people register. But I think it's certainly worth talking to the communities team and getting them to do that, because I can't see that will be particularly onerous.
I think it would be nice for each area, say like Tavern. I know we've got some groups who are on the lottery, and for our residents to know how much they've raised for that particular group.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Aylsham actually has got quite a few groups on the lottery as well. So yeah, that's fine.
And Aylsham also has got 12 people asked for a grant and we can't provide. But anyway, Sue, and then we wrap this up. And I think the whole process has been very good in terms of keeping a focus on what it's about. And we just strayed off a couple of times. I think that's going on at the moment. But yeah, Sue.
Yeah, mine is sort of budget related, Chair. It's just that we have budgeted for this amount of money. And for some councillors, we could probably spend it twice over.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that it would have been nice, and I'm not sure whether this is possible, if a councillor who has another group who would like some extra money, could perhaps utilise the resource of a different councillor if it were possible, if they haven't got anybody, if you see what I mean. As it's budgeted for, I just think it's a shame if people are not using what's in the budget.
Yeah, the money that isn't spent isn't lost. It goes into the Broadland Council part of the lottery. So then it can then be applied for by groups from that fund. So it isn't lost. Yes, it is budgeted for, and we don't take it back if it's not spent.
No, sorry, I do appreciate that. It was just that I could have another somebody else I could still give some money to. It would be nice if I could and they're a group that would not apply for a lottery part, but that was just a side issue. But I like the fact that it's in the budget.
Sue.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is for any groups who ethically can't use the lottery because they have some kind of anti-gambling type of philosophy. So could we not establish a pot of funds for those who can't use that method of attaining their funds?
I mean, it's stepping out of my role a little bit here, but I know the communities team are willing to help anybody to look for grant funding if they want it. So I think contacting the communities team is the first way forward. Start creating different pots of money is setting up a whole cottage industry, I think, which will, you could come up all different sorts of people wanting to set up separate groups, but they're extremely helpful, the team, at finding money, I can assure you, where there's money to be had.
Right. I really think we've done this one, Def. I think if there's any more said about this, we're just straying into politics and decision making by ONS recommendations, cabinet, and we shouldn't be doing that now. This is purely about is there enough budget for the forward plan, etc. And I think by and large, that's been a good meeting with the Cabinet. I really do appreciate you attending. And I think we'll wrap it up there and now all have a nice 10-minute break before we continue with our agenda. And thanks very much for attending, by the way. Much appreciated. Ken. Tony. Review of public consultation process, Emma. Page 25, Ken.
Yep, 25 for the committee. So this, the committee will recall Councillor Shaw requested this to come in to better understand the different consultations that the council undertakes and the approach that they take with those. You'll see attached to the report some appendices over the key consultations that we undertake over the course of the year, and you've got the key officers that lead on those consultations in the room to discuss any questions that you may have. So simply, I'll take that as read, but obviously there's questions if you wish to ask them and have a look at the way that those current practices and processes work, and share any comments and suggestions on that, Chair.
Okay. So we'll open it up, Peter.
I mean, clearly what this is a list of things that already happen, some of which are statutory, some of which are very particular. But what this doesn't address is how the council can engage with its public in terms of what general issues they want to discuss or raise or consider. And I wonder what plans are in place to engage in a more meaningful consultation about general matters relating to the council rather than highly specific or statutory ones, which frankly for me don't cover the need.
Do you want me to come back on that, Chair? So paragraphs 2.4 to 2.6, unfortunately, Corin, the Assistant Director for this area, can't be with us today. But that sets out exactly that, Councillor Bowman, in terms of, yes, there's absolutely the statutory stuff that we consult on specifically. We're now looking more around that general inquiry, that general consultation with our customers. And that's being worked through by the new Customer Insight and Experience Lead. And there is an item on your forward plan, I think, Chair, in terms of an update from that role. That was a new role that was put in, if you recall. So those paragraphs, they're kind of set where we've got to with that, and how we'll take that forward. And obviously that's work in progress. So that's giving you an update on where we are with that. But absolutely, Councillor, that's about that more general consultation with the public, how we do and what could we do better, and where can we improve.
You're right with that, Peter? Right, okay. Jen?
Yeah, well, following on from that, I mean, it's just an observation, really, and we've already mentioned the Help Hub and how useful that has been in terms of engaging with our residents. Well, I was saying our residents, they tend to be groups as well as residents, and that they are often, they have their own networks as well, and I'm just making the observation that we have those links that are growing and could be further developed, and it would be, a meaningful way of engaging on these general issues of concern to residents, sort of interest to residents that don't come up through necessarily the statutory processes.
So I think I'll defer to Mike on the specific bit, but I think that's exactly what that customer panel is there to do, that we're looking at. So we've advertised for people to come in, but we've also gone through groups as such as that, so we can ensure that they can be part of that panel and part of that conversation. Mike, I saw you nodding. So.
Hello? Oh yeah, we're there now. Sorry about that. I'll learn. And I think the one thing, and you're absolutely right, and how do we, and when we look at general issues, the power we have to work with communities and residents, particularly when you've got a start of a 10. So, whether that's a positive or negative, so, there's speeding in your village or there's willingness to improve the local play area or whatever, if you've got something you can start a conversation with, that's much better. And I think that's certainly something that we're feeding into the new Customer Insight role. Because once you've started that conversation, you've got that network, as absolutely you said, you can then look at other stuff as well. And the bit that we used to have safer neighbourhood action panels working with the police, and they were okay, but where we got to a point of going to a village hall, have you got any issues? and then virtually no one says anything. So, you've got to have a reason to start that engagement, but that's very much in our thinking, and I really want to try and build and through COVID and supporting community groups, we've come up with mutual aid groups. So we've got a lot more support out there at the moment. And so we've got some really good caliber of individuals and people who aren't traditional respondees, and they're not traditional statutory bodies, for example, like the parish council, etc. But they're actually just people in the community who can help promote, what we're talking about, and also feedback in. So there's absolutely an opportunity there, and I think I'd also put in there that the role of members in that as well, and how I've seen over the last few years, we've kind of, when members and officers work together on this, it works really well, and I don't think we've got that quite as where we need to be. So there's an opportunity as well.
Anyone else? Just going back in time, which is, I know why Nigel raised this one, because we had a time and task on this going back before the one team, and part of the focus then was that when consultations are taking place, how many people out there on a public consultation are actually aware that there is a consultation. And the result of that was actually, from that time and task, was that it was recognised that we hadn't actually got to approximately 80%. That was the gauge at the time. There was a good bit of work on that time and task, and it was agreed that the council would have to have a look at how it could examine about how it can get its message out that there is a consultation in place, because consultations, you can have a response, and we have all seen them. You see them at county consultations as well, where, population of, what is it, 1 million or whatever, and you get 200 respondees. What can you take from that level of consultation? So that's part of that was, and I know that's what his focus was, because it had been raised years ago. It was agreed, and it identified, there's a good bit of work actually by a research officer, that 80% of the population didn't even know a consultation had happened in Broadland. And that was part of the focus as well. So just wondering, Emma or Mike, in this, it seems like that issue's still sort of out there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Chairman, that is out there. I was having a chat with our comms lead this morning, just to kind of get a bit of background for me on this, to bring into you kind of what are our most successful consultations. Right. And the most successful one we had, because to be fair, is what's in it for me. With a lot of these consultations, we offered a year's free council tax. That is the highest response to any consultation we have ever had. The second closest was an iPad. So there is something around it in terms of, residents do need to see what's in that old adage of what is in it for me. I think each consultation is different and needs to be targeted in different ways, as you'll see from the various papers that different officers have brought to you today. I think what we do and we are getting better at is using as many channels as possible to publicise that consultation. So we use the website, we use social media, we try and push those through local members as well. So it's anything that we can do to get as much information out there as possible through all those different channels, because people respond in different ways to different things. But I think it does go back to it. If there's something in it for you, whether that be a potential prize at the end of it or something that directly impacts on you, you're absolutely motivated to respond to that consultation. From a general perspective, and we know this with internal consultation that we do, if, doesn't matter either way to you, people aren't focused to respond. And I think that's something that councils struggle with across the country in terms of how do you up that rate, because it is very much those that are directly impacted by are those that want to respond. I don't know if any other officers want to add anything, or if they see the same in theirs.
Yeah, I mean, just from the point of view of planning, I mean, obviously, it's, I guess, in terms of plan making consultations, generally, we see large numbers of responses because it's such an emotive issue. If proposals are more controversial within a community, then that's the drive for people to respond. I think the paper that we've produced alludes to the statement of community involvement, which is a legal duty to have that procedural document in place where we have to set out how we are going to bring consultations to the attention of people that live and work in the community, as well as giving them accessible opportunities to kind of take part. So that document does feature a range of different publicity methods that we will use to try and get that message across to as wide a cross section of the community, whether that's a specific parish or group of parishes or a district, as possible. So yeah, and that document is currently being reviewed as well.
Yeah, and it's very coming, Carol. I'm just going to, because we're on a little bit of a channel here ourselves at the moment, or funneling as it's called. So the planning was actually cited before in our previous time and task on this. And we have direct consultation, as you know. So application goes out to immediate neighbourhood, people affected, so they get that letter through the door, put on a lamppost, letter put through the door, and therefore you get a response. It's well understood that if you didn't do that, you get less response. So the issue that's focused in on before was that, yeah, and there's resource for that. There's a statutory around it as well. So there's resource for that. So on what you were saying, Emma, just connecting this up, well, you don't have direct consultation, but you are really wanting public to respond. Yeah, you have low return rates in terms of that, if it's not really directly affecting them in their perception. However, what we did find was that 80% of people didn't even know there was a consultation. And that was part of the focus that we focused in on before. And then it was agreed we're going to have to examine channels, social media, emails, and it kind of, the research officer went and things changed and it kind of just went off. And this is what Nigel's bringing back to us again. You know, it's the right thing to do. So it's back on that sort of point that how perhaps this new person, Emma, I don't know, can look at this just again to say, is there anything else we can do just so the public are aware that there's a consultation other than the kind of previous 80% that we knew, never even knew there was a consultation. That was quite a big part of the issue that exists. And I don't know at the moment because we haven't done, I don't know if there's research on that at the moment, but we don't know.
So on that point, Chair, I'm just looking at your work programme. In June, there is a customer strategy update coming from that new role that you'd requested, and that was to receive an update on the measures being used to deliver the customer strategy. I don't think it would be a far reach to cover what you have just said as part of that report as well, so we can look at that discrete point as part of that.
That'd be great because then we can have some focus in on it. There might be some mechanism we can try to find that out. Yeah. Because I know particularly for your area of work, Mike, it can be very useful, you know, but of course people have to know. So we agree that, you know, we'll hold that focus, as Emma said, that's coming forward in June. Yeah, I'll come back to you. Don't worry, Caroline. Yeah, okay, I'm taking it that's agreed, yeah. Caroline.
When I see these surveys, I do try and put them on the local social media forums. But what are we doing to capture people who don't use social media or the internet? Can we not use leaflets or posters in local libraries, put information in the local magazines? Are we doing that?
So I think from a general perspective, as I just said, we look at all the various social media, whether it's social media, all the platforms available to us. So from the magazine to our links with parish councils, to social media platforms, to the website, to try and use as many of those things as possible, because we all know we've all got our own preference. I personally hate speaking to people on the phone, so I'll do everything I can via email. But everyone's different, aren't they? And everyone has their own approach to that. I think the officers are really aware of their best channels to use on those specific consultations as well. So I think they're already aware of how they would use those and push those through. But, you know, we're always welcome if there's more ideas and things that we're not reaching for those to be shared, so we can look at how they can be proactive as well.
Okay. I couldn't see you behind. Nigel, so you first and then you final.
Just to say that I'm working with the wellbeing team, the staff members, to try to have produce an article to put into Broadland News, addressing it mainly to the people who do not have access to social medias, to the recognizing that there are a whole lot of people out there in our demographic of Helston South East and other parts of Broadland where there are people without access, don't wish to have access, and this is going to hopefully give them some guidance as to how best they can access our services and talk to us when they're ready without having to go through the electronic gateway. So I'm working with them at the moment.
So again, so just interesting that when we have this focus back on June, as we've just been through with Emma, perhaps that could also be a bit further down the road as well in terms of what you're doing there for that meeting as well, which could be quite helpful, I guess.
Well, we're very early on in the investigation of how they're going to address it, but I put thoughts their way, and I've written them a page of A4, and I shall be going in to talk to Dan and Kerry and see what we can put together. But we are terribly conscious about the fact that there are a load of people who just don't bung it in an email. They don't have the facilities. They don't know how to, even some of them. So see how we help those
If we're
sort of
using
people.
social media, then we can't even send them an email or use social media.
I had 2.5 weeks before Christmas without any internet and any landline telephone, and to live for try and run my life through just a mobile has been virtually impossible. But it made me realise that there are a whole load of people who don't have it at all, and we've got to try and reach out to them so that they can access us when they need help. We've got to let them know what help they need, what help's available. Try and let them know what they need, and then how to go about it.
Thanks very much. So far away.
Just very quickly. So it's because it's also a resource issue. And so, for the council to be able to continually give out leaflets and what have you is not on, but it's reiterating going back to work through existing community organisations and some of those that cover Broadland and South Norfolk, Community Action Norfolk, Good Neighbourhood Schemes, Women's Institute, those kind of organisations, which and having that community panel, which will be able to utilise for those kind of communications. And for many people, print isn't suitable. It's verbal, and it's utilising those networks. But just thinking of a situation, I work with a neighbourhood management team with community connectors, but different kind of community connectors who are actually based within a community and dealing with a whole range of issues beyond health issues in this particular case. But it would be great to see that kind of network developed and expanded. Thanks.
Okie dokie. So I think we're sort of about there. So if I just come back to the recommendation here under 4.1, I'll read it out, just make it simple. I know. See, can you scrolling away there on your iPad and others? That the Overview and Scrutiny Committee note the current practices and process for administering public consultations and review these to explore and offer suggestions on how improvements can be made to enable outcomes from consultations to demonstrate the wide-ranging views of community. Given the debate we've just had, I think it's probably appropriate, James, that it's there that we add in this additional focus for June and mention June. So we'd have another little paragraph going in there, 4.2 or whatever, which we have agreed. And then that forms out in a minute as well as a part of the recommendation. Brilliant. Wonderful. All agreed? Any dissent? No. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, guys, for and lady for attending. Take care. Anyone still here for the forward review? Sorry, for our work programme? I don't think so. Is it? No.
Would you like me to take you through the work programme?
Just getting to it. Right, so page 37. Well, and Emma, yes, if you could take us through it, please.
No problem. So page 37 is just things that you've closed down. That's why they're greyed out. I've just kept them on for continuity, but they'll come off your next work programme. So over the page onto page 38, we have the ongoing time and task panel on the staff turnover at Broadland. I'll come back to that later on. It's further down your work programme. You've had your joint budget meeting today. The next item was the housing allocations policy that you received prior to Christmas, and that will be coming back at your December meeting because it was agreed that you'd reviewed that 9 to 12 months down the line. You've today also received the engagement in public consultations, and I'll update the work programme to reflect the report that you're already receiving in June and that additional information within there. The Norse Environmental Waste Services was down for today, but the financial information for Q3 wasn't available in time, hence that coming to your March meeting. Because obviously we are reliant on that from news, so that will come to you then. In March, you'll also receive the Overview and Scrutiny Committee annual report, which Chair will start drafting with you imminently for that meeting. And then in June 22, you've got your customer strategy update, which is the report I referred to on the earlier item, and your review of empty homes policy. So that's how your programme looks for the next few meetings. The dates aren't in yet for June because we're working on the plan of meetings at the moment. Following down, you've had updates on the apprenticeships and new schemes, future topics, and broadband and mobile phone coverage. There's no further updates post that, and you receive information on the water supply. Moving on to time and task panels, as we said, that work is ongoing. I know you requested me to write to former employees. I've checked in with our data protection officer around that, and it's quite an unusual request. So we are just checking with our legal reps to make sure we can use that data that we hold on previous employees to contact them. But Chair, I'll let you know as soon as I get a response back on that one. And then that's the end of your work programme.
So on the time and task on that last one, I mean, we just saying, I've lost my page. I'm looking for, because we need, have we got a date here for that?
No, you haven't, Chair, because what we agreed was I'd craft a letter once I've confirmed I can actually contact previous employees at that request for you to have a look at and make sure you're happy with, and then I'd need to write out, once we've done that, we can then convene based on what responses I get, if in fact I'm able to write to them. So I just need to close that bit down for you.
Right. So no matter what the position is on that letter, we're still
Well,
to meet
absolutely,
anyway.
we will need to meet, but I thought I don't want to put
Right.
one in until I know whether I can write to them or not, and I can let you know where we've got to. So once I've got that resolved, I'll then
Right.
pick that up with you to get that booked in.
Okie dokie, I see. Yeah. Sue?
Thank you, Chair. Did we have an item raised about water quality, river water quality?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, that's at the bottom of page 39.
Oh, okay. Quality of river water as well, does it?
Okie dokie. Anything else on that? No? Right. Well, I think we're there then, aren't we? Right. Well, thank you everyone. And next time we'll just make